to have this panel. But before we start, I just want to see a quick show of hands. If you're a founder or a startup executive, can you raise your hands, please? Fantastic. Fantastic. Great to see this crowd here. And here's a fun one. How many of you have AI-powered or Agentic on your websites? Okay, awesome. So we're going to get some real talk out here. So if you're thinking about products, if you're thinking about design, engineering, and what is AI kind of doing to it, we'll kind of start from the ground floor and then walk through that. Obviously, Karan, who runs Character.ai, is on one of the bleeding edges of what AI is doing. And then Tom Keynote, he is the Chief Product Officer of Vercel. A lot of you may have used V0 as a way to start building your apps, and he will talk a little bit more about that. So before we get into anything, the first thing I wanted to ask you, Tom, is we've gone through AI washing pretty fast, and now I think we're doing agentic washing. Everybody talks about agentic this, agentic that. If we have to take a step back, what does an agentic enterprise mean? And from what you see, how would you define that?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, come on in, everybody, make yourselves comfortable. And thanks for having me. I think, the first wave of AI was how can we leverage AI to do our existing jobs more efficiently? Help me with research, help me with drafting, help me with revising what I'm writing. Help me solve this simple task. And I think the shift to sort of more agentic enterprises, you start to consider agents part of your staff, part of your colleagues. How can I leverage much more capable AI to actually potentially rethink how I organize and rethink how we operate as a business? What about you, Gary?
I think it's a good summary, which is we were in this co-pilot world, and I think the simple example I think in my head is we're all comfortable with a GPS as a co-pilot helping us where to go, and now Agentic is basically way more. It is driving on its own along with the rest of the fleet. It's a very different paradigm. So you have a self-driving fleet now. How do you dispose it? How do you use it? That's basically what Agentic world maps to, and it's a very different way of thinking how you build software and also what the software company does. So I think Tom's right, which is this is truly a phase to a very different way where we see agents as staff members as opposed to being assistants to an existing person.
So it's a new class of employees who you can harness for doing amazing things. That's one way to think about it. But also, we all tend to live in a very nice bubble called Silicon Valley, where things are supposed to have already happened in the future and we keep moving on. So, but what do you see when you're talking to your customers? Where are they today, and what is the gap you see between where we sometimes feel like we're living in the future versus what these customers and enterprises are experiencing?
Yeah, I do think that we're living a little bit in the future when you compare yourself to a lot of the ways that companies are operating in the rest of the world. We're all kind of wait, am I too late for this one? What's happening? I'm here to say I don't think you're too late. And I don't think that this transition to the sort of agentic world of the future is going to take as long as the sort of cloud revolution or the mobile transition. So each of those, I think you really had some time to sort of make the migration to the cloud. For some companies, it was a digital transformation, and there was a long way that you could do that. Then the transition to mobile. You maybe had a few years. I was at Facebook during the era where we transitioned to mobile. The iPhone came out in 2007. I don't think we had a working mobile app until 2012, right? We took some time to really rotate into mobile. I don't think we have quite as much time here. So while I'll say you're not too late yet, I actually think we'll be having a different conversation in a year. We're accelerating so quickly. The velocity isn't what's staggering, it's the acceleration. And so, I think you're not too late yet, but we really probably need to get started today or this week if you want to not sort of feel like you've fallen behind.
So just to make sure, one, I think the time scale you described is important, right? Like I think we had n number of years or like much shorter. The key takeaway here is like the AI transition will be much faster. But I think for a lot of enterprises, the good news is, if I heard you correctly, Karan, like you can go over the Copilot phase faster, you can leapfrog it, and then just go to the agentic thing faster. But don't be complacent, because this is definitely happening. This is akin to like, you didn't have landlines, you went to the cell phone, so it's kind of the same concept you can rather go here. I think it's a very good takeaway for what people should be putting urgency behind and where you can go. So kind of bringing it back to what you're doing, Karan, like how are you kind of thinking about like building products in this agentic world? Because you drive a business which is largely at scale consumer business.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a different way to think about how you build an agentic business for consumers versus enterprises? What are common, what is kind of not common with the enterprise side?
I think I'll caveat this by saying at Character AI, we're very spoiled because the entire product is AI.
Yeah.
So we had the luxury where we didn't have there was no product before Character AI, which was a pre-AI version. So the whole product is AI served as a chatbot or now a full role app. So there is no legacy to board AI on. So I'll just put that caveat, which is, we would have both Facebook, and Facebook adding AI is different than Character or Gemini or ChatGPT had AI native. But if I keep the AI native nature of Character AI aside for a second, I do work with a lot of enterprises that advise them. And I think we joke, in Silicon Valley, we all build for the imagination of the CEO, but enterprises adopt it at the pace of the So there is some time, to Tom's point, where adoption curves are extremely accelerated, but there's time to catch on. But the way we build, that mindset has shifted. So I think what I want to talk about is less about Character AI, consumer app being AI, which we have a slight advantage in just purely building an AI app. But the way we build has fundamentally changed. What it means from our roles, job definitions, our build process, our experimentation philosophy, the fact that there are no POCs, all that is completely out of the window. And that shift is probably more critical than the outcome of the product itself. So I think that's, for me, I'm old enough, you see all white hair. I've seen multiple transitions where you're like, wow, like this has been as fast as anything I've seen, and it's just getting faster. So we've retooled our entire factory floor to be building AI using AI. And I think that's a pretty big unlock for us.
And also very interesting the way you said it, is there's no kind of precursor to what you're building. So in a way, I think it is truly AI native. Like this product wouldn't have happened if not for AI, is kind of another way to internalize for me. Tom, like how have you kind of become an agentic enterprises in the way that you build products for customers today? Like how does Versal make that shift to be an agentic enterprise?
Yeah, so I think every company that stands the test of time has to reinvent itself probably a couple of times if you're going to really stand the test of time. We see this with large consumer products shifting over time, and the Mac was the Apple's crown jewel, and now it's the iPhone, and they've had to reinvent. But Vercel has reinvented itself from the front-end cloud to what we now call agentic infrastructure, appropriately. And I sort of think about this in three different ways. First of all, we provide infrastructure that coding agents, we talked about, can target for running applications that we build. And I think that's really important because a lot of the software that gets produced going forward is going to be built by humans and coding agents. And then the second piece is you can actually use our platform to build and run agents, right? And then the third piece of this is that infrastructure itself has to be an agent. It has to be able to improve itself. I wrote a blog post recently called Self-Driving Infrastructure to extend the Waymo analogy. You don't necessarily need to say how to get there, but you tell us where you want to go, and the infrastructure takes care of the rest, and then can optimize that route over time. So, we were previously a great way to run web applications, very dynamic, personalized applications, very fast, global, amazing. But the software that we're writing is fundamentally shifting, the way that we write it is fundamentally shifting, and the way that we run it has to fundamentally shift as well. So for us, we use Vercel to build Vercel, and that means that we ourselves are using agents to improve our agentic infrastructure. And I think it's sort of like this virtuous cycle of improvement that's happening. So that's ours.
No, I love that actually. I think in this point is probably the heart of the whole talk, to be very honest, which is we've gone through traditional software development life cycle that we're all comfortable with. And it used to be waterfall, and then we're like, okay, how do we make this faster? And then Scrum came along, and then Agile came along. And I think that was a very different dimension of thinking about software, which is it is still a linear software, where you figure out what you're going to build, and you build it, and you ship it. And all we did with all the transformations were speed of making that process faster.
Yeah.
This is entirely different. This is y-axis. The software you're building is not even software as you know it. It's an agent which is self-evolving in production. So if you're sitting and writing specs of what this should be, you have no idea what you're doing, because that piece of software, by the time it was in production on day 1 and day 20, is already changed. So that requires a fundamental shift that you're not trying to get more cycles from the traditional software development life cycle. You're fundamentally rewiring yourself, saying agents are building agents, and they're improving themselves in production with live data. And that just requires a fundamental way to rewire. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, which is if you're trying to code faster or write specs faster, you're missing the whole point. What you need to do is y-axis, which is how's code writing code, and what does it mean to run that code in production with the right harnesses and evals and the whole completely new stack. And I think that's the biggest unlock.
So what I'm hearing is like time compression was the problem we solved in a lot of previous cycles. Here we're compressing the learning and adaptiveness of what you're building much faster, right?
It's not about automation.
Yeah.
It's completely reimagining it.
So let's kind of bring it to the second level then. So with all this happening, what does it mean to the products you're building and shipping? Like, is UI, are buttons dead? Like, what is the future like here?
Yeah. I'll start on this one. So, self-proclaimed front-end engineer. I've been building UIs for 30 years. I love UIs. I don't think they're dead. But their role is shifting. I think generation 1 of software, we would architect our database schemas, and we would draw diagrams of the relationships between these things. And then at the end of it, we would sprinkle a little UI on it so we could make changes to the systems, and that'd be great. And then I think wave 2 of software that I was involved in was UI first. Here's the end customer experience I want to unlock. Let me figure out the right data model and infrastructure to power that user experience. But the UI ended up becoming the sort of tree trunk from which everything else would branch. I would click that button, and then something would happen, and then somebody else would get a notification. For example, the role that UI plays, I think, in the future is actually fundamentally different. It's no longer where things start. It's sort of where the human and the software system interface with each other. So it becomes about validation, about observability, about auditing, about security and trust. It's not necessarily that place where everything starts. And I think the shift that you'll see, I've been calling this the shift from pages to agents. The shift that we're going to see is going to be all about software meeting customers where they are. So you don't necessarily go and load that app and log in and then navigate through a dashboard. Now you can send a text message to your agent, or you can write a message on Slack or Microsoft Teams, and trigger your agent. And then a sophisticated software system will kind of pick it up from there. But the bigger shift I see is, agents can operate autonomously. We were just talking about this. So you configure the rules of what the agent is allowed to access and what it can do, and then you set up these triggers. And now all of a sudden your software is doing things for you, and there's the UI that's involved in that is like, hey, here's a report of what I did, or do you want to approve these changes? So UI ends up playing a little bit of a different role than it did previously.
And how has that shifted the way, in character.ai, should I think about as an example or a leading edge example of a hyper-personalized app? Or do we see this as everybody's going to have a very hyper-personalized app, or is it a hyper-personalized experience? Like, where will this lead us to?
I have a hot take on this one. I think let's not confuse, which is what we love to do in Valley and media, is hyper-personalization means everyone will get their own version of the app hyper-built for them. That would be a nightmare to manage for everyone who's building software. I think we confuse hyper personalization with hyper fragmentation, which is what should not happen. But I think Tom's examples are perfect, which is 80% of the UI is not needed anymore. UI still has a very critical role to play. So you need the button. You don't need 100 buttons to give to the user, because that's what AI has to reason over and say, hey, by the way, in this moment, in this context, this is a button you need to click. Are you okay with it or not? And that's the confirmation example Tom had. And then character is a good example because we have 20 million AI native people constantly giving us feedback. So you get to learn on where the future is happening. They don't want UI. Wherever possible, that I get the UI out of my face altogether, and I want control over my experience. Hyper-personalization of apps essentially means it's the same app, it's the same one character app that we ship, but everyone's experience is hyper-personalized to what they want. And this seems very obvious when I give you an example of a Facebook app or a TikTok. Your feed is different than my feed, than Tom's feed about you. And in that world, you're like, yeah, this makes sense. Think of this as what happens to enterprise software, where your experience with the software, you're sitting in Salesforce, you're no longer logging into this insane dashboard which I still don't understand. I don't say it's insane.
No shade.
Yeah, it's scary, man. Like, you need a PhD to get through all the UI in any of these apps. I don't want to pick a fight with Salesforce, but just give an example of enterprise software. 80% of UI is inverted. It serves no purpose in an AI first world because the agent is the one reasoning over it. But you still need the UI to tell you, this is what I did, here's a quick summary, here's what action you need to take. And that requires a fundamentally different way of thinking and designing power. And the Scat AI was just forced to do it because our product is AI native and the audience is AI native. But the minute I give them more UI, oh my gosh, you should see the backlash on the community in an instant. They're like, get out of my way. Like, this is my relationship with the AI product, and I will customize it. And that's just requires a fundamental UI.
So one benefit I do see though is that I think to take it one step further is the hyper personalized experience can also mean unlock here, which is we have, for example, attendees from different parts of the world here. That means accessibility for people from different parts of the world in the languages they choose to and the interaction they prefer is possible now, which was much, much harder without the technology we have today. So that actually makes it a great way to kind of get more people, using some of the products. And the other thing I've heard is that the UI not being there sometimes can also help kind of remove the barrier of adoption.
That's right.
Because earlier you had to kind of teach people how to use whatever the builder decided is the way to do things. Now the user can discover how to do the best outcome without having to be in that constraint model. Like both of you kind of have a similar thought or like anything different?
Yeah, I mean, does anybody here use Zoom? Just a quick show of hands. Zoom? Okay. And have any of you used Zoom's settings on web? Again, no shade to anybody who builds Zoom. It's the most complicated UI I've ever seen. There's 35 items on the left-hand side, and each one of those has 30 tabs across the top, and then when you click one of those tabs, you have to scroll for 14 days. So that settings experience, I think, when we talk about hyper-personalization, the way that I describe the setting that I'm looking for, I want to allow participants to unmute themselves when they join, right? Like, I don't know where to find it, but if I could search for that in natural language, or if I could, whatever it is true to me, the UI that gets presented to, whether it's you or me, will be the same UI, but the way that I got there was a little bit different, and I didn't need to navigate through pages and pages and menus to get there. So when I think about personalization, I think the atoms, the primitives, the building blocks will end up being the same. And Gen UI is not necessarily about manifesting a UI that no one's ever seen before on the fly. It is about more efficiently closing the gap between intent and outcome, right? And so hyper-personalization, like the nightmare scenario would be like 50,000 users see 50,000 different UIs. No, it's everybody has a different way of getting to the same experience. And we now can finally do this with LLMs, et cetera.
Well, you touched on something interesting which I hadn't thought about, but you hit a very important point. When there's no UI, adoption curves actually become easier. And there's a reason why you see ChatGPT adoption or Gen adoption in countries where typing is harder because language is complicated. There, the speech adoption and voice adoption for LLM is far higher than us sitting there who still love to type on a keyboard and because that's what we got used to. They just completely skip that past the keyboard generation. I think there's something to be done with a low barrier, no UI actually unlocking a lot more hyper-personalization than would be possibility.
So now to the probably the third pillar, which is probably what everybody's wondering, like, am I going to have a job? Like whatever I learned for the last 15 years, is it like out of the window? Should I pack up and go home? And in some people's case, maybe they can afford to go home, go to a beach. So the fundamental question is like, PM, Eng, design had a very particular role in crafting and building a product, and that is getting kind of completely disrupted.
Yeah.
So the question there is that, like, what is the biggest unlearning people have to do if you are in one of those roles today, but you're still passionate about solving customers' problem and building something for them?
I have lots of thoughts. Might start again. Yeah, I think historically there's always been a fidelity gap between what you wanted to build and what one function thought you wanted to build, and then what ends up actually making its way to production. And I think that the best way to describe what's happening is we're sort of closing that fidelity gap via technology. I think AI is a real accelerator here. So the traditional SDLC, product manager describes what needs to be built. The designer will mock it up. We'll hand those mock-ups over to the engineer will build it. There's a slight fidelity loss every step of the way. And now we have the ability with modern tools to really, the designer can actually go straight to a prototype that you can click around. The engineer can actually start with a really good design by default. Something like V0 gives you something that looks good and follows design rules. And the product manager actually can probably help build all of this stuff. So the biggest thing I think people need to unlearn is that these functional silos matter anymore. And everything is going to sort of spread and have a bunch of overlap with the next step in the SDLC. But to the point earlier, it's no longer a linear process. You go from idea to prototype back to iteration really, really rapidly right now. And so in theory, we can achieve much higher fidelity outcomes in much shorter periods of time. But it requires that everybody kind of expand a little bit into the adjacent functions and not hold their function as sacred.
Yeah, I think strong plus one to what Tom said. I think first I will acknowledge like living in this paranoia that do I have a job on Monday morning. I think it's healthy because only the paranoia survive. And if we don't think AI will transform our jobs, we're living definitely in a cave right now because, strong examples, what used to be a product manager's job is no longer product manager's job. Your job is not to write PRDs. In the past, there was no alternative. You had to write a PRD for somebody else to start building. Now, there's no excuse why a PRD is not a PRD, it's actually a working functional prototype. And guess what? At Character, actually, all the product, all the designers, they should be stored in production as well. And we have to go build other things to make sure that they don't destroy the production output. But that's an example where the job definitions that we knew of are gone. They're not evenly gone everywhere. I think if you are in a smaller startup, high pressure, you don't have a choice. You don't have as many people to throw the problem. Enterprises stretch along the curve, but they'll get there as well. So I think the number one thing is you have to go outside the job definition for sure. And if that paranoia is not keeping you current to learn, it's a wake-up call. I think we all need to wake up. The second part, though, is I think a lot of this jobs will not exist. I think it's blown out of proportion. And I think we were last year we were talking about some stats where the number of engineering jobs are still at an all-time high. It doesn't mean that one company has 100,000 engineers because you don't need as many, but there are a lot of engineering people, a lot of AI people still needed. So everyone's retooling themselves. So if you're not retooling, it's a problem, but there is enough opportunity to go create. You definitely will see 10, 100 people companies creating $1 billion of revenue, because that's possible now, based all these examples Tom shared on why. The part which I think for me is the biggest unlock is, if you are not willing to become a polyglot, like I can do more than one thing, then you don't have an alpha. You really need to find an alpha is, I am a deep expert in something, or I have extremely high agency to do multiple things. If you're neither, for a point job, yeah, it's good enough.
So I think equally, I think what I'm hearing is that if you are able to kind of have a retooling, learning mentality, I think it's an amazing time. And then for all you startups and founders there, startup founders there, there's no better time to build something. I think everybody can build something very, very well today. And I think that's exciting. That's also empowering. But with that power comes a bit of responsibility, right? Because code is like free. So the question really becomes, so how should any of these roles, because they are so malleable now, anybody can do any of these things, how should one think about experiments versus actual product that you ship?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important things these days is restraint. Like you said, software is free. Well, that doesn't mean that just because you have a holiday break, you should build 2 net new databases and deploy them on the world. Our CTO literally did this. He built 2 databases. He's like, I really wanted a Postgres engine for a SQL. And we're just like, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, I'm not going to ship it because I don't want to maintain it. I don't want to inflict the world with this pain in my new database. But I think actually judgment is more important than ever. You can't outsource your judgment to the LLMs. And so I think restraint and everybody wants to say, taste is the new moat.
Yes.
I don't need to go there, but I think that's just terrible. It's just a terrible take. Taste has always been paramount, but I really do think that clarity of vision, knowing what to build and what not to build, your ability to execute on all of the rest of the work, right? Building the thing is free now. That's never been the only thing associated with being successful. And then I think trust is going to be more and more important over time. So as a product owner, I call it product owners now. Whether you're an engineer, a product manager, or whatever your role is, you're a product owner. You need to really have a clear vision for what you're building and why you're building it. You need to earn trust, and you need to execute on all the rest of the stuff that needs to happen for that software that was free to actually matter to the world.
Yeah, and I think I've talked enough about back AI where I think just because you can build a feature, the more features we ship, our users actually tax. We have hard data every time we experiment, and we're like, wow, I have 16 cool ideas, I want to keep shipping them. Users still have the same cognitive load to adopt that, so it's one part of the consumer. But I think there are other very critical things about building and selling software, which are underappreciated but now people understand. Governance, distribution, finding product market fit, the relationship that you have with the brand. Like you buy Apple for a reason, right? And there is some trust there. Those things will disproportionately be more valuable now because building the cost of building software goes down to near zero means that other things have to be hyper juiced up because the feature that somebody else builds and in a partner the next person builds is exactly the same. Most of it's coming from Cloud or whatever system you like anyway. The question is, who has the judgment of what to ship, what's relevant, what will actually find the product market fit, how do we find the right distribution, what partnerships really matter. These things will really be a critical part of it. And I think I love the fact that taste is to what was the thing to understand, but judgment of what not to ship will 10 out of 10 times help you win because, as I said earlier, less UI is better. You don't get to less UI just because you can build more features. It's a complete antithesis. AI usually means more code. What you need to do is less features. And that's a very hard thing to get right. And people who can do that because they understand the customer really well, or you're deep in a domain, that's the real unlock. So I'm pretty bullish overall that AI does not necessarily destroy value creation, but in where the value creation is happening has definitely shifted.
Okay, with that, let's go to the quick rapid fire section. Are we entering a quantity versus quality problem? Like, are we going to be having a glut of applications with code being free?
I care a lot about quality, and I instruct our team to leverage AI to make it so that you can ensure quality by default and ensure higher quality outcomes. I do think there's this velocity opportunity now where everybody can build everything really quickly. That's not me. That's not my team. That's not my company, right? So we really are rotated heavily into quality. So no, I don't want that to be the world, so I'm not going to build that world.
That's awesome. I spent my winter holiday building an app to do some travel planning after spending $1,000 in tokens. And once it was done, I found out there's a $2.99 version of it in the App Store. So just because you can build doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. Switching slightly more personal, like what is the one AI tool that you personally use off late that you find very gratifying, very useful, very valuable?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Whisper Flow. I'm not sure if Whisper Flow founder is here or not, but I'm a huge fan. I mean, obviously, everything is Claude or Codex in the end, but Whisper Flow fundamentally lets you unlock a level of working.
I don't want to turn this into an ad for Whisperflow, but actually, like I used to say, typing is never the bottleneck when I was a software engineer. Actually, now typing is the bottleneck. I gotta get these thoughts out. I go directly into like the V0 prompt or into ChatGPT, and I say, zhuzh this up for me, or can you build this app? And my gosh, it's changed my workflow pretty dramatically. So I think.
Plus one on that, like the only thing downside I see is sometimes my text messages are getting longer.
Yeah, that's great. That's certainly excellent.
Okay, the last question. If you look out, I will just say a few years, because decades are too long right now to predict. With the progress of AI and the pace at which we're moving, do you see this a doomsday scenario? You're seeing more of a gloomy scenario? Or are you seeing it as a boom scenario?
I'm in the boom camp.
Same. That's why we're here.
Yeah. I think it's the best time to be ready. And I think, yes, value chains are shifting, and you can either be on the cutting edge and really come out on the other end really successful. So, yeah, this is kind of a turbocharged economy.
Yeah, I mean, unprecedented levels of creativity are being unlocked right now from people who didn't used to have the tools to build the thing they wanted to exist. I think that's a reason more than anything to be excited about this, and I think there's just going to be this proliferation of net new ideas, and the best ideas are going to continue to win. But yeah, I mean, look at the numbers, right? Like everything is, we're building more, hopefully we're building better, we're going to make sure that we are. And so I think there's every reason to be optimistic.
Yeah, so I would probably close by saying, I think with the developments we see in AI, I think the biggest takeaway for me has been you can think about solving problems that are almost impossible and really hard to solve. That combined with everybody being a builder, I think is a really exciting time, and especially the amount of people who raise their hand who are building and for startup founders. That, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for each one of you to go and make a huge impact on the world. So definitely plus one to the goal. So with that, I think we come to the end of the session. Please join me in giving a big round of hands.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Karan, and thanks, Bala. A great conversation, collapsing the distance from idea to product. Fantastic. Please. Tom. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you again. So that brings us to the end of the session, what we call Conversations Without Borders. They're not just sessions. Tomorrow is a very full day, and if you liked today, you will love tomorrow, and then you will be truly in love the after. But tomorrow we have our grand keynote is by Santosh Janardhan from Meta. He reports directly to the executive team, Mark, and he heads all of Meta's infrastructure. So what a way to start the day as we double click on AI infrastructure as a track. And we'll also be, we have other keynotes that are focused on cybersecurity as well as healthcare. So we have two important track conversations. You will hear from the CEO of PANF, and also you will get more from, we have our TIE 50 competition, which is one of our flagship events. And finally, just a little peek, just like you heard from unicorns here, there's another unicorn panel tomorrow, two of whom are in the stack infrastructure space, and one of them is going to be in the application and platform B2C space. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. And of course, in healthcare and life sciences, as always, we have strong representation from Gilead, and also from the wearable side, Dexcom and a few other companies. So take a look at the agenda. It's a full day VC Connect for those of you who are founders looking to connect with VCs, and Mentor Connect for those who are looking for mentorship. Please sign up. There will be lounges in the expo. And in addition, if you haven't signed up for GTM Fundamentals, that's being led by Mayfield, that's another one to look forward to. And we will have none other than Naveen Chadda in one of our opening keynotes after Santosh from Mayfield. So look forward to seeing you all. We have a packed full day, and I'm grateful that you took this afternoon to be here with us. Thank you.